Global leaders now, they are concerned about the worsening economic outlook, and South Africa's own economic growth prospects are a major talking point at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Our business editor Xolani Mbanjwa is there. And Xolani, I believe you have the group CEO of Nedbank there with you. No doubt the country's energy crisis also a talking point there.
Good afternoon, Tutuzile. Yes, indeed, the global economic outlook has been a major talking point here at the World Economic Forum. And of course, South Africa has been a focal point with the international delegates wanting to know more about the energy crisis in the country, as the country is a destination for investments. So there are worries when it comes to what the plans are in terms of the country stabilizing its energy provision. And you're right, I am not alone. I have the CEO of Nedbank Group, Mr. Mike Brown, with me this afternoon. Mr. Brown, thank you very much for your time. You've been here the whole week. It's day 4 today. Tell us a little bit about your engagements with the international delegates that you have engaged with here in terms of the insights that you have from WEF2023.
Yeah, thanks very much. The World Economic Forum, it's always such a pleasure to be able to come here and represent both Nedbank and our country. And I think if I had to try and look at the big picture messages that I'm taking back from engagements here, first and foremost is a huge focus on the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, and a lot of discussions around the impact that is in turn having on economies everywhere in the world through primarily rising energy prices and rising inflation, and those two in turn driving up interest rates and reducing global growth. So, big picture message, global growth 2023 likely to be somewhere around about 2.6, 2.7% compared to just over 3% in 2022. So a slowdown generally in global growth. There's also, I think, a number of messages around the accelerating importance of climate and climate change, and at the same time the importance of energy security and how those trade off against each other, as most countries over the longer term will move to much greener forms of energy, but in the really short term need to keep energy supply absolutely intact. And then certainly from a South Africa point of view, our engagements have been balanced around the longer term opportunities that I think many investors see in a country that has young, innovative population, has deep mineral resources, has the best infrastructure on the African continent, very deep financial services skills, but at the same time, in the short term, a huge focus on the energy challenge that's facing us and 8 to 12 hours of load shedding. And I think most investors, certainly new investors, will be sitting on the sidelines until they can see us actually make meaningful progress in delivering a change in our energy supply.
That is quite an important statement to make, because you have said that when it comes to potential economic growth, we could reach something like 3.5% on an annual basis if we did not have the energy crisis. But you are also saying, as Nedbank CEO, that this energy crisis presents opportunities. Tell us more about that.
Yes, I think I'm on record for saying for the last several years that energy and Eskom is the largest risk facing our country, and that energy supply is a binding constraint to growth. Our economic unit forecasts GDP growth in South Africa 2023 of around 1.5%. And, it's very difficult to see how the economy can grow more than that when even at these low levels of growth, we don't have sufficient electricity supply. And, we can debate for a long time how we got into this mess, and we never ever should have. But given where we are, certainly we all need to do everything that we can to help fix that situation. And I think that it is inevitable that private sector investment in electricity generation, either through embedded energy generation, where we know most of the large corporates, and in particular the large mining companies and electricity users in South Africa, have already kicked off embedded energy generation projects. They're going to take 18 to 24 months to connect to the grid. So they're only going to solve our problem in 24 months' time. But, I think we're going to see massive private sector investment in energy generation, either embedded generation or over the longer term renewables feeding into the grid.
A lot of the international CEOs and the delegates that are here, including those who are in the city of Davos exhibiting their work in the hydrogen space, etc., they talk about the slow pace of implementing decisions in South Africa. Do you agree that we seem to be moving slow when it comes to implementing these policies that are good on paper, but they never really move with speed?
I couldn't agree more. Again, I think we've been saying for a long time that we are strong advocates of the structural reform package that government has announced. That structural reform package centers on energy, transport and logistics, water, spectrum, municipal services, all sort of underpinned by a dramatic improvement required in crime and security. And I think those plans are all great plans, but we have been way too slow in implementation. Clearly, the government has had some headwinds to deal with in the form of COVID. But notwithstanding that, we are just simply very poor at execution of plans.
Let's talk about something forward-looking. Interesting enough, the interest rates chart has been part of the Global Risks Report here at the World Economic Forum, and it's something quite important when it comes to the Reserve Bank Monetary Policy Committee. In a couple of days, they will be announcing their decision. I would like to put you on the spot in terms of what are your expectations. 50 basis points, is it expected from your side? What is your forecast telling you?
Well, so, first and foremost, before you start talking about interest rates, one needs to look at inflation. And, inflation in South Africa is high. It's still well over 7%. But if you look at the last few inflation prints, and I might have my numbers slightly wrong, I think they've been 7.6, 7.4, 7.2. So high, but beginning to reduce. And I think in that sort of environment, inflation is still way above the Reserve Bank's target level. I think the Reserve Bank will continue and should continue to hike interest rates. We believe another 50 basis points at this meeting coming up. But as inflation starts to reduce, both globally and in South Africa, I think we are starting to get closer to the end of the interest rate hiking cycle. And, probably by the time we roll forward into 2024, hopefully we are starting to see inflation at levels low enough that interest rates can begin to start coming back down again.
Mike, in about 5 weeks' time, Minister of Finance Enoch Godongwana will take to the podium to speak about the budget plans for this year. Having heard what he had to say in the midterm budget around plans when it comes to Eskom and taking the debt out of Eskom, and now the ANC also talking about moving Eskom away from the state-owned entity department into the energy department. What are your thoughts about that? What do you expect to hear on the big topical issues in budget 2023?
So I think the first big topical issue in the budget will be fiscal consolidation. We know that our country borrowed far too much money and that money wasn't invested in productive infrastructure and capacity. And as a consequence, our debt to GDP, or how much money have we borrowed to how much money do we produce ratio, went far too high as a country. And that's one of the reasons why we saw our debt downgraded to junk status. Now, I think Minister Godongwana has laid out in the medium-term budget framework, I think, a very sensible consolidation path for our national debt, and debt to GDP, stabilizes at around about 75% in that plan. It continues to go up in the short term, but certainly stabilizes. So I think we'll want to see him remain within that fiscal envelope. We need to live within our means, in short. Then on the other big issues, I would certainly expect to see that transfer of Eskom's debt to the government balance sheet. to all intents and purposes, from an economic point of view, it's already there. Eskom is too big to fail. Large chunks of Eskom's debt are already guaranteed by government because no one will lend to Eskom without a government guarantee. So whether that debt lives on Eskom's balance sheet or the government's balance sheet, in an economic sense, doesn't really make much difference. So I would absolutely expect to see that happen, and that would free up some resources for Eskom. And then finally, we certainly don't believe that moving the line of responsibility of Eskom within government is in any way going to improve the situation. I think that's smoke and mirrors.
Mr. Mike Brown, Group CEO at Nedbank, thank you very much for your time. Sir, that you heard in terms of forward-looking, the budget in terms of interest rates, it is something topical for the next couple of weeks. And you heard from Mike Brown, the CEO of Nedbank, talking to us about what the expectations are and what has taken place here at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Back to you in studio.
Xolani Mbanjwa, you keep warm up there. Thank you.